Courtney set the table for breakfast, glanced at it critically, and was highly satisfied. She cooked everything her husband loved so much. Jeffrey required special care, and Courtney was okay with that. He had suffered from gastritis and related problems since he was young, so he needed a special diet food. Courtney didn't find this annoying at all. She loved her husband and tried to make sure he was in good health. Jeffrey was deeply asleep when she touched his shoulder and began to wake him softly. "Is it morning already?" he asked, opening his eyes. "What a nightmare. I didn't sleep well." "You should take the day off. You work too much. It's not good for your health. You push yourself too hard. You came home very late again yesterday. I don't even remember what time it was. I fell asleep before you came home," the woman replied, opening the curtains and letting the sunlight into the room. "Well, Courtney, you know how much I work. I have to do it, and this promotion hasn't made my life easier." Jeffrey got out of bed and began to get dressed. "That's okay. I have a vacation in August. The boys will be back from summer camp, and we'll go to the sea together," the man resumed. Tommy and Alex, Jeffrey and Courtney's sons, had been at the summer camp for 2 weeks, with only occasional phone calls to their parents. After the sweltering city, they were happy to be at the summer camp, especially because it was by the river. Courtney was very happy for the boys, although, like every mother, she missed her children. Plans to go to the sea with her family made her very happy. She smiled and kissed her husband. "I'll look forward to August," she said as they started eating breakfast. "But we have another important event very soon, remember?" "Are you talking about my birthday?" Jeffrey smiled. "Well, yes, I'd really like to celebrate in a big way, except, you see, it falls on a Saturday. But my boss is going to send me on a business trip," Courtney replied sadly. "So when are you leaving?" Jeffrey raised his head. "Thursday night, and I won't be back until Monday morning. Would you mind if we celebrated your birthday next week?" she asked. "I don't mind at all. I'm not a little boy who's going to be cranky about such little things," the man replied. "Well, that's good. I hope we celebrate your birthday in a way you'll remember for the rest of your life," Courtney said confidently. "I do not doubt that. But still, it's sad that you and the boys won't be here. It's my birthday and my family will be away. Anyway, when the boys return from the summer camp, we'll all get back together like we used to," Jeffrey smiled. "By the way, I'm not far from their camp. I want to stop by and see them," Courtney said. "Great, say hi to our boys for me." Half an hour later, Jeffrey left for work, and Courtney cleaned up the house, sat in a chair, took the phone, and began calling her husband's relatives, friends, and coworkers. But first, she called her mother-in-law, Mrs. Miller. "Courtney," she rejoiced, "how nice of you to call. We haven't talked in a long time. How are you doing? How are my boys doing?" "Everything is fine, Mrs. Miller. The kids are at summer camp, incredibly happy, and Jeffrey left for work," Courtney replied. "Well, that's great. Please tell me, how is he doing in his new position?" her mother-in-law asked. "He's doing great. You know, I'm so grateful to Mr. Rogers for offering Jeffrey this position at his company. I mean, he's very talented. But the company Jeffrey worked at before didn't let him prove himself at all," Courtney replied. "Yes, that's true. It's a great fortune," Mrs. Miller agreed. "Well, you know, Mr. Rogers was my late husband's best friend, so he was happy to help our son. I asked him for it myself. Mr. Rogers had known Jeffrey since he was born. When I gave birth to him, they threw such a party that they almost forgot to pick me up from the maternity hospital." Her mother-in-law laughed, and then she added, "Have you met his young wife? He lived alone for a long time when he divorced Joan, and recently I found out that he married a girl almost 20 years younger than him. It's a miracle." Yes, Mrs. Miller. Jeffrey said they have a big age difference. I think Christine is a year or two younger than me. I met her once. We met at a corporate party. By the way, you'll meet her soon because I want to invite Mr. Rogers and his wife to Jeffrey's anniversary party. But please don't tell him anything. I want it to be a surprise. Actually, that's why I'm calling you. I told my husband that I was going away on a business trip for a few days, and in the meantime, I wanted to get everything ready. Also, I wanted to ask you a favor. Could you bake a birthday cake? I don't know anyone who can do it better, Courtney finished. Thank you, my dear. I will make the best cake. You can rest assured, Mrs. Miller replied. They chatted some more, discussing the coming celebration, and then they said goodbye, and Mrs. Miller went about her business while Courtney continued to make phone calls. On Thursday, as she told her husband, Courtney left, and on Saturday, after inviting all his friends, she waited for Mrs. Miller, who arrived at the meeting place with a huge cake. In a noisy, cheerful company, they all headed toward the house to surprise Jeffrey. Just a couple of hours earlier, she had called Mr. Rogers, Jeffrey's boss, and a friend of his late father's. Mr. Rogers, good afternoon. Do you remember I told you that I wanted to surprise my husband? I was planning a party for next week, but the circumstances changed, so I decided to throw a party today on his birthday. I hope you and your wife have no plans for tonight and can join us. Again, I apologize for such a spontaneous invitation. Yes, Courtney, thank you, Mr. Rogers replied. I'll definitely join you, but unfortunately Christine cannot come. She left yesterday to visit her parents. I don't know how long she'll be there, but I'll come. I haven't seen Mrs. Miller for ages. How is she? How is her health? She's fine. She'll be happy to see you too, Courtney assured him. Fine, don't start without me. I'll be there soon, Mr. Rogers said, and hung up the phone. Finally, they arrived on the spot. Courtney opened the door quietly, and everyone could see rose petals scattered all over the house. Candles burned everywhere, creating a special, charming atmosphere. The guests looked at each other in bewilderment. Courtney went to the bedroom and opened the door. The crowd gasped and rushed into the bedroom, pushing Courtney away. Jeffrey was in their marital bed with Christine, Mr. Rogers' wife. A cry of indignation burst out of the wealthy husband and the unfortunate, disgraced mother. Mr. Rogers rushed to his wife and, without even letting her cover herself with a sheet, dragged her into another room. And Mrs. Miller, who had been holding the birthday cake the whole time, threw it at her shocked son. Scoundrel! Bastard! Loser! How dare you embarrass us like that? Shameless asshole! Was there something missing in your life? Your wife is brilliant, your boss is a golden man, and he gave you a job and immediately offered you a leadership position, and you decided to crap where you eat. Mrs. Miller cursed her son. Humiliated, broken, and covered with cake cream, Jeffrey sat on the bed, covering himself with the blanket. The guests made noise and gasped, and then one by one, they left the house. Screams came from the next room. Mr. Rogers yelled at his wife, and she sobbed loudly and tried to justify herself somehow. Mrs. Miller cried and ran out of the house. It was as if everyone had forgotten about Courtney. Even Jeffrey himself, shocked by what had happened, didn't immediately dare look at his wife. And when he did look up, he saw her smiling. "What does that mean?" he asked, beginning to realize that the whole situation was no coincidence. "What's unclear?" Courtney grinned. "You've been making a fool of me for a long time. I was like your second mother. I've cooked for you and treated your gastritis. All your clothes are always washed and ironed. You don't know what it's like to live in a mess. Nobody ever bothered you, even your kids. But it was only because I took care of your peace and well-being. And that's how you thanked me. Endless cheating. You got so insolent that you even stopped hiding it because you thought you were smart. You're actually unbelievably stupid. Now everyone knows what you are and what you do. In 1 minute, you've lost your wife and family, good job, reputation, and even friends. Your mother will forgive you someday, but she will never treat you the same way either. If you want to ask why I kept quiet if I knew about your cheating, it's simple. I wanted revenge, and I succeeded. You're a jerk, Jeffrey, and you look pathetic right now. But that's nothing compared to what you'll look like in a few years. But we have kids. We have a family. Let's forget about what happened for the sake of the boys, Jeffrey suggested. Would you be able to forgive me if I cheated on you? She asked. Well, I don't know, the man shrugged. Well, I know, Courtney grinned again. You would certainly forgive me because I was providing comfort for you, which you were so used to. For that, you would forgive me not 1, but 10 cheats. Now tell me, why should I forgive you? No, Jeffrey, don't even think about it. By the way, here's my gift for you. Divorce papers. After what all the people saw here today, it won't be difficult for me to get a divorce. And now, goodbye. I'm leaving for my hometown. By the way, the boys weren't in a summer camp. They live with my parents and are waiting for me to arrive. I'll rent an apartment and live happily with my boys. Courtney, I won't let you go, the man uttered. Oh my goodness, Jeffrey, you're not only stupid, but also blind. I took all my stuff out a long time ago, and you didn't even notice it. You never condescended to such trifles. You only cared about what was important to you, didn't you? Finished Courtney. At this time, the door swung open and Mr. Rogers appeared on the threshold and turned to the girl. Courtney, let me talk to your husband. I don't have a husband anymore, Mr. Rogers, Courtney replied, and with one last chuckle, she left. She caught a cab and asked the driver to take her to the hotel. She was smiling, her eyes shining with joy, and the cab driver involuntarily looked in the mirror all the way at this beautiful, happy woman who had no worries. But he did not see how Courtney went into the bathroom and washed her face for a long time without taking her palms off her face. The water rustled, hiding the bitter sobs of the world's most unhappy woman. Resentments and frustrations choked Courtney, but she wouldn't let anyone see her in that situation. If her sons and parents weren't waiting for her, she would surely do something stupid. But now she knew she had no right to do that. And she also knew that Jeffrey, with whom she had lived for 14 years, was not worthy of her tears or any stupid deeds. After crying for a few hours, the woman fell asleep. And a few hours later, she decided to take a walk around the city so she wouldn't be alone with her thoughts. She had a train ticket for tomorrow night and needed to do something to pass the time. To Courtney's surprise, she was met at the hotel entrance by the same cab driver who drove her there. He was holding a bouquet of flowers. She looked at him in surprise, and he immediately took a step toward her. I knew I would meet you again. My name is Eddie. May I know your name? Why? Courtney was confused. How do you recognize me? I've never seen such a beautiful, smiling woman with eyes full of pain. That's not right. You should be smiling and glowing with joy. I'm willing to help you do that. Just please tell me your name, the man asked. Courtney said her name and smiled. She realized that her life was not over, and there were many new and interesting things ahead of her. Well, Eddie, let's take a walk. You may not believe me, but I'm happy to have met you. It's been a few years since then. Courtney not only married Eddie, but they have a cute little daughter together. Her sons loved Eddie, who taught them to drive and took them on fishing and camping trips. The boys enjoyed spending time with him in the garage, barbecuing with Eddie and his friends, and doing many other activities together. As for Jeffrey, in all these years, Courtney had never heard of him, but she didn't even want to hear about him, because, for the first time in her life, she was loved, and truly